As we come near the end of this look back, it's time that we take a rest at looking at the significant artists who left a major impact in this animation medium. However, since this is the best of stop motion, not only is it to celebrate the people that made these movies, but also the movies themselves. And there are a lot of them, quite well known in fact, that are not attached to a big name in the field like Ray Harryhausen or Tim Burton. So, without any of those little biographies in the way, let's go straight to the movies and take a look at the others in the best of stop motion. Now let's start back in 1973, down into the surreal world known as La Planète Sauvage, or as they call it in English, Fantastic Planet. Set in the weird future off in a distant planet, human beings are now considered an inferior race called Oms to giant blue creatures known as the Drags. For them, Oms are like animals. They either need to be exterminated like pests, or be domesticated like this little boy named Tear, who is what the story is about. He managed to escape from his masters with a device that can boost his brain power and goes out to find more Oms to stop the Drag's domination. Now, as some of you are watching this, you might be thinking, what the fridge is this? This looks more hand-drawn animated than it is stop motion. What gives? Well, this is still considered stop motion, just another form of it called cutout stop motion. This is where everything you see on screen is made out of paper, from the backgrounds to the puppets themselves. It gives out a 2D look like hand-drawn animation, but uses the same technique and craftsmanship as stop motion. A good example of this is the animated segments by Terry Gilliam in Monty Python's Flying Circus. And considering that we're talking about Fantastic Planet, it really does look like something that came out of a Monty Python cartoon.
Monty Python's Fantastic Planet!
But back onto the movie, the story was based on the French novel by Stéphane Wool in 1957, Hommes en série. It wouldn't get an English translation until 2010 by Creation Books under the title, well, Fantastic Planet. For the strange and surreal art style of the film, French artist Roland Tapor stepped in as not only the production designer, but also the writer along with director René Laloux. Funny enough, Tapor didn't even spend time on the animation itself, since the crew took about 5 years to make. Apparently, the story itself is supposed to be a surrealistic satire on the Soviet occupation of the Czech Republic, since the book and the movie was made during the Cold War. So when they started production in Prague, Czechoslovakia, the crew had to move to Paris, France in order to get away from the ruling communist authorities. This also explains the lengthy production. However, it seems that there was even a little war within the production. The crew wasn't really happy with René Laloux as the director, since he was kind of the only non-Czech person there. They wanted the film to have a more nationalistic feel to it and wanted to replace Laloux with the movie's character graphics designer, Joseph Kabert. However, this did not happen, as René managed to prove himself as a fine leader for the feature. When the movie premiered in May of 1973 at the Cannes Film Festival, it won the Grand Prix Award along with another French film, La Maman et la Putain, or The Mother and the Whore in English. The movie then got a proper release in the US thanks to the distribution of the master of B movies, Roger Corman, on December 1st, 1973. Then in its own home countries with France on December 6th and in Czechoslovakia on December 21st. From then on, the movie heavily influenced some music artists for their work, like the band Failure named their third album after the movie, Mac Miller used the music of the film in the beat of the song Insomniac, and hip-hop artist Madlib would cite this film as an influence. Also, this movie has often appeared on several top lists of the best stop-motion animated films, and it's one of the prime examples of Western European animation. Moving ahead about a decade later, there was one film that decided to use stop motion and attempt to take it a step further. The result is something that's unlike any other animated feature out there, which is simply known as Twice Upon a Time. In the dreamland of Sonny Frivoli and the nightmarish works of the Mercwork, synonymous Botch, the nightmare producer of the Merc, has successfully kidnapped the deliverer of dreams, Greensleeves, and his figment of imagination. This is all in part to complete his master plan to cover the world of Din, which is pretty much a metaphor for our world, with nothing but nightmares forever. Now it's up to two unlikely heroes to rescue Greensleeves and stop Botch's nightmare plans, which consist of Ralph, the all-purpose animal, his friend Mum, and a cast of others. Now, back in 1972, John Cordy decided to go and buy a house and convert it into an entire studio called Cordy Films. Specifically, the house is a 3-story Victorian at 200 Mill Avenue at Mill Valley, California. While there, John was starting to hire people and simultaneously make animated shorts like Thelma Thumb for Sesame Street and The Electric Company. He didn't start production of Twice until 1978. As the new animators would come in, these shorts would be the training ground before they could start working on the big movie project. You see, at the studio, John pioneered his own form of animation called Lumage. It's a little complicated to explain, but here it goes. The main technique used for Lumage is a lot like cutout stop motion. But, while filming, there is a light underneath, and the paper used is a special kind called Pellin, which allows it to be more translucent under the light, even with paint on it. The result gives out an effect where it looks like an image from a stained glass window coming to life. However, one note I'd like to add is that not everything in this movie is made out of Pellin. Other than some of the live action scenes, the animators would use some actual objects to work on the stop motion, like the train in the opening sequence and the living supplies in the nightmare sequence. Unfortunately, there was a lot of scenes that actually didn't make it in the final cut. However, it has been reported that some have survived through the animators' demo reels. Some of these scenes include the death of Greensleeves, as well as possibly playing a bigger role compared to the final cut, Ralph thinking that Mum died in the nightmare sequence, only to find him alive moments later, and a live-action shot where a bunch of nuns are attacking on an inflatable woman on an elevator. Okay, whoever has that last deleted scene, can you please put that on the internet? This must somehow be turned into a meme. Anyways, at the end of 1979, the crew managed to put up a 3-minute trailer so that John can show it to a good friend of his for some financial help, George Lucas. And yes, that George Lucas. By the way, prepare to be surprised by the amount of recognizable names who worked on this film. George ended up liking the trailer and contacted Alan Ladd Jr. of the Ladd Company to get John the budget needed for the film. Alan is the same guy who helped George finance Star Wars back when he was only known for making films like THX 1138. After production went full swing, John got hired to do some other directing projects on the side, thus leaving Brian Norell to direct while Cordy wasn't there. In the film, not only is the animation style completely different, but also how the dialogue was handled, since a good bulk of it was completely improvised. This was because John really liked the improvising style and hired a cast of improv comedians to do the voices. Originally, Bud Cord was supposed to voice Ralph, but then he was replaced by Lorenzo Music, who would later be known as the voice of Garfield during the 80s and 90s.
It does kind of stink, doesn't it? But then again, it's garbage, you know?
Oh, the kitchen looks like a dump. The living room looks like a vacant lot with garbage all over it.
Another notable person in the cast is Paul Frees, the prolific voice actor known for his works as Boris, Ludwig von Drake, several Disney attractions, Rankin Bass cartoons, and so much more. But that's not all. There are also some noteworthy people in the crew. This includes art director Harley Jessup, who would go on to be a production designer at Pixar and a few other places, like James and the Giant Peach, Monsters Inc., and Ratatouille. There is also Henry Selick, who worked on the Nightmare sequence. No, really, it's the same Nightmare Before Christmas and Coraline director. See? Along with Henry, there was also his cameraman, David Fincher. And yes, that David Fincher. And it was said that both Henry and David were really close to beat the crap out of each other. Anyways, when it was ready to be released, the Ladd Company wasn't really sure about what to do with this film. They had two choices on their plate. They would either give it a wide release or just a limited one. What happened was that executives of the Lad Company felt that there was more promise with another film, The Right Stuff, and decided to give that a wide release, while Twice Upon a Time received a limited one on August 5th, 1983. However, there was apparently two different versions of the film that came out. There was the original PG version that John Cordy wanted, and an alternate cut. You see, back in the early 80s, it was a really tough time for animation. Disney was making stuff that viewers and critics felt didn't have that magic touch given by Uncle Walt for his classics, and the others started to implement a more adult tone in their features like the works of Ralph Bakshi. So what happened was that one of the producers of Twice, Bill Cotturi, decided to take unused recordings of the character Botch where he would swear a lot and put it on his version of the film to give it that adult edge. Afterwards, he would distribute that version without Cordy knowing. In other words, Bill secretly made his own adult version of the film and pretty much told Cordy,
Well, let me just say, tough
This made John really upset, and after just 2 weeks in theaters, it was pulled out, making the film a box office flop. What's worse is that after making a few more Sesame Street shorts, Cordy Films was shut down. As for the artwork used in the film, it's been said that a lot of it has been given away along with some animation cells and even some audio recordings of the songs. The whereabouts and knowledge of who has them today is considered unknown. A few years later, the film received a few airings on HBO, but it was Bill's adult version. John didn't make much of a battle with them, seeing they were a corporation and he had no power over it. He did have some liberties when the film got released on Laserdisc and VHS in 1991, as the release contained the version Cordy intended, with the exception of some possible further edits in the final half. Twice also aired on Cartoon Network in 1998, part of its cartoon theater run, and that was apparently the last time the film was ever seen or aired on television. As of 2015, there is no word regarding if Warner Brothers would ever release the film on Blu-ray or DVD.
Oh, well, never mind then. So I guess we're gonna see it on TV soon? Wait, it already aired? What the fridge? Is 2015 the comeback year of Twice?
Thanks to the internet, the movie has since gained a small cult following, gaining more attention to the movie itself and the technique of Lumage animation. Now, if we are going to talk about the best of stop motion, then we have to look at another icon of the medium other than Wallace and Gromit and Jack Skellington, the one and only Gumby with his theatrical debut, Gumby the Movie. It's about, who else, Gumby, and his band, the Clayboys, holding a benefit concert to save some small farms from the Easy Loan Company. Suddenly, the Blockheads, the owner of the company, kidnap the crew and Gumby's dog Lowberry, because he's able to cry pearls, and replace the band with robot clones. Now Gumby and his friends have to stop the Blockheads and the clones to save their reputation and the farms. Now there might be a chance some of you are watching this going, who the fridge is Gumby? Well, to give you guys a quick history lesson, Art Clokey began working on animation as a student at the University of Southern California in 1953 when he created his 3-minute short, Gumbasia, which is a tribute to Walt Disney's Fantasia. And by that, I mean it's based more on the segments like Tokata and Fugue rather than The Sorcerer's Apprentice. Anyways, a few years later, Art and his wife, Ruth, decided to create more stop-motion shorts, but this time with characters like Gumby and his horse Pokey, which landed their shorts to appear on the Howdy Doody Show in 1956. A year later, it became such a hit that NBC decided to give Gumby his own spin-off show that ran throughout the late 50s, the early 60s, and even the late 80s, and ever since, Gumby became not only a stop-motion star, but also a TV icon. But back onto the movie, this would be the last film in which not only Art Clokey would work on, but also Dallas McKennon before their retirement. Art was practically in charge of almost everything. He was the director, cinematographer, animator, co-writer, and did the voice of Pokey, Prickle, and Gumbo. As for Dallas, he's known to be the original voice of Gumby and did the voice of several characters in the movie. By the way, for those of you who don't know who Dallas McKennon is, he's a prolific voice actor who mostly did work on some classic Disney animated films and attractions, including...
If any of you folks are wearing hats or glasses, best remove them, cause this here's the wildest ride in the wilderness!
When I was young and in my prime, I thought I never could marry, but I fell in love with a pretty little gal, and sure enough we married.
Attaboy, Pete.
Ring-a-ding-ding, Mary, prettiest little gal I ever did see. Her name was Devilish Mary. Hadn't been married but about 2 weeks, she got as mean as the devil, and every time I looked cross-eyed, she hit me on the head with a shovel. Ring-a-ding-ding, Mary, prettiest little gal I ever did see. Her name was Devilish Mary. Her name was Devilish Mary.
In other words, this is the guy I wish to be. Originally, Michael Jackson was supposed to do the music of the film, but instead, they brought in guitarist Craig Chaquico, who was first brought in to do Gumby's guitar solos. The production of the film began in 1988, and it was entirely complete in 1992. When they were done, most of the animators moved out in order to work on The Nightmare Before Christmas. However, there was a problem for the movie. Art couldn't find a studio that would want to distribute it. This wasn't until 3 years later when a small studio named Arrow Releasing came in to help the distribution. The movie was released first on VHS on October 4th, 1995, and was released in theaters on December 1st, 1995. As for its reception...
It's ugly. I think, yeah.
The movie got pretty bad reviews, mostly because of how it's considered old-fashioned compared to the newer stop-motion films at the time like Nightmare, like its animation, and the humor that would make a lot of references to things in the 50s. As for the box office, since Arrow could only get the film a limited release in 21 theaters, it only managed to get $57.1 thousand. Sheesh, and I thought A Troll in Central Park was bad. But on the bright side though, the movie did get a happy ending. When it was released on DVD, it came out as a director's cut that made the movie shorter from 90 minutes to about 77. Also, because of the VHS and DVD sales, the film manages to gain a cult following amongst the Gumby fanbase. Moving ahead to the new millennium, stop-motion features are still going strong thanks to the big names of the industry like Aardman Animations and Henry Selick. And then comes 2009, when film festivals were introduced to Mary and Max. It's the story of two pen pals who have been writing to each other for about 20 years while dealing with their dark lives. The pen pals are Mary, an 8-year-old Australian girl who lives with an alcoholic mother and a distracted father, and Max, a 44-year-old obese New Yorker who has to deal with his own weight and mental issues, since he does have Asperger's syndrome. Apparently, this movie is actually based on a true story. Well, loosely. You see, director Adam Elliott based the character of Max from his pen pal from New York, whom he wrote for more than 20 years. As you can tell, I say loosely because Adam is not an 8-year-old girl. When you get down to the themes it talks about, you'll notice that this is a very heavy movie, since it gets into subjects like loneliness, childhood neglect, obesity, suicide, anxiety, autism like Asperger's syndrome, depression, and isolation. Speaking of isolation, Russell Crowe, along with 38 other people, refused to play the part of Damien in the film, which the role was ended up in the hands of Eric Bana. According to him, he got threatened to voice Damien by Adam and his crew, saying that if he doesn't, they'll take him off the American SAG list. By the way, Eric, along with Barry Humphries, who played the narrator in the movie, were previously together in an animated film as Bruce and Anchor from Finding Nemo.
I am a nice shark, not a mindless eating machine. If I am to change this image, I must first change myself. Fish are friends, not food.
The principal filming took about 57 weeks by using 133 different sets, 212 puppets, and 475 little props, one of which is an Underwood typewriter that actually works that took the crew about 9 weeks to make. Whenever the movie would need water, the team would use lubricant instead since it's much easier to control for a stop-motion film. In fact, in the scene where Max imagines himself on a deserted island, it took about 2,400 teaspoons of lube in order to make the ocean. This was the first ever animated feature film to open for the Sundance Film Festival on January 15th, 2009, which then follows several appearances at many different film festivals from all around the world. It didn't get an actual release in theaters except in Australia on April 9th, 2009, where it manages to earn $1.7 million at the box office and fantastic reviews, saying that Mary and Max is a lovingly crafted, startlingly inventive piece of animation, whose technical craft is equaled by its emotional resonance. As for awards, it may not have gotten even a nomination from the big ones like the Oscars and the Annies, but it did get some from the film festivals, including the grand prize at the Ottawa International Animation Festival, the Annecy Crystal Award at the Annecy International Animated Film Festival along with Henry Selick's Coraline, the Crystal Bear at the Berlin International Film Festival, and Best Animated Feature at the Asia Pacific Screen Awards.